It's the County Conversation. Back to you with episode 17. I am your host, Cameron Ponsonby. I'm joined, as ever, by the wonderful, the fabulous Nicholas Friend. We've got a one-day cup kind of preview for you. Last week, we had a kind of more macro look at the show. We had Harry Swindles on. This week, we've got Ed Barnard, scorer of a century on day one. Last year's top run scorer, if I am so correct. We're going to run through to you guys kind of teams to watch, players to watch, just so you know where your Metro Bank fever is lying, is sitting. Nick, we're going to start exactly there with this kind of question of how do you know who's good in this competition? You've obviously got a lot of players leaving for the 100. If you have to pick winners and favourites, and I am going to ask you to do all those things, where would you start?
No, you're right. I think it's the bit I've found most interesting to cover in this competition the last few years is, it's hard to tell. Like, take, for example, I went to Essex v Warwickshire on the first day of the competition this year, which was Wednesday. So you're probably listening to this, 2 days later. Now, Essex could have Dean Elgar, they could have Simon Harmer. Simon Harmer's got a back injury. Dean Elgar's being rested. But he's available, and he's in their squad, and he's not in the hundreds. And in Elgar's case, of course, he's not an overseas player either. So he could be there. And if you add Dean Elgar to a team, you're going to make it stronger. But not everyone goes that way. And I think the first couple of years, the odd team almost gave a couple of their senior players sort of a month off. And others have sort of flitted in and out, depending on sort of individual needs. I mean, Surrey, for example, when they've looked towards sort of title challenges in the Championship, have gone, okay, we'll get the cricket that we need into a Dom Sibley or Rory Burns or Ben Folkes, but without pushing them for the whole competition. Needless to say, if you have those three in your top five in a competition that I'd say is, that has proven, sure, those three aren't, T20 bashes, but they're very good red ball players in their own rights, obviously. And actually, red ball players have had a lot of success in this tournament, particularly sort of more established guys and other guys I think we'll get to later as well. I mean, so it's really hard to tell because you can't count on take last year Andy Amead scored 600 runs. No one probably looked at Andy Amead in Somerset before last year's tournament and went, well, he'll churn him out. In the same way that James Bracey himself would probably tell you that he wasn't expecting to get a double 100 last year. It's a funny competition that does funny things. Ali Orr was reputationally a bit of a blocker when he first came on the team with Sussex, got a double 100 in the One Day Cup. It was sort of the making of him in a way, in the way that he's gone on to play the game. Ollie Robinson, who couldn't get into Kent's Blast team, did a loan spell at Durham, came back and got a double 100 in the One Day Cup. Like, it's done an awful lot for a lot of players, but it's also meant that, I don't know, it's been a really interesting competition to cover. So you've not really known who the favourites are. You wouldn't have put much money on Leicestershire winning it last year, but equally you probably wouldn't have thought Hampshire missing a large sort of crux of their squad would get to the final last year and the semi-final the year before. So a lot of it comes from how good your youngsters are, who the guys are coming through. John Turner was massive for them 2 years ago. He's got an England development pace bowling contract now. And at the other end of the spectrum, you probably, you wouldn't look at Warwickshire and go, oh, they've got Ollie Hannon Dalby, they'll be strong in a white ball comp. But he was the.
Oh, that's what I think that all the time. Whenever
he was the leading wicket taker by a mile last year, and I remember sort of asking him if it felt like he was almost like alphaing juniors by rocking up in this competition and basically nicking off a lot of young batters. Because actually the best answer to your question, the short answer to a long rambling answer, is that the teams that have done best in this competition over the last few years are the teams who've retained a fairly senior bowling attack. There are a lot of very talented batters around, but where you've got a talented young quick, they've tended to be snapped up by the 100 for pace reasons, or they tend to be injured because we're in. Mitch Stanley, to go back a year or so. Or they tend to be injured because it's late July, early August, and if they played a lot of cricket and they're fit, they're going to be managed through this month to get them through to the Championship running. So, in fact, the reason I was so surprised by Middlesex getting pumped by Worcestershire on the first day was that actually Middlesex are pretty close to their first choice attack. Bamber, Cornwell, Cullen, Henry Brooks. They're missing Tom Helm to 100. Toby Rowland-Jones is wrapped in cotton wool, but that is not far off the best they will field through this tournament. Whereas you look at Worcestershire, and there'll be people having to Google some of their bowlers. They signed one of them at very late notice. Another one's come in through the national counties, Tom Hindley. And they've got 2 teenagers in Harry Darley, Jack Home. So you wouldn't necessarily look at their side and think that should win, that should go far, because they've got a lot of injuries as well. But so much of this competition historically has been about the strength of your seam attack. If you look at the 3 winners so far, Glamorgan and Michael Hogan, Kent had Darren Stevens, and Leicestershire had Chris Wright. And they've got one thing in common, which is that they're all old dudes bowling seam up.
We love old dudes bowling seam up. Yes, that Middlesex Worcestershire game. This was a stat that Ian Marshall, who makes the kind of the Playfair, the Cricketers Who's Book of the Year. He points out that Middlesex Worcestershire match on the opening day of the competition had 8 debutants in the match, which was as many as the county championship had provided all summer, which I quite enjoyed as a stat. It is an interesting. It's an interesting contradiction of the One Day Cup, especially in terms of where you associate strength. So, for the sake of ease, you point out to Surrey in their top 4 will have Dom Sibley, Rory Burns, and Ben Folkes in it for the majority of this season. But then in this crowded schedule, often because it's so busy beforehand, people will then have the time off. It'll effectively be a case of we're going to use this period to rest. Now, who are those teams who are having people going? Who are people who are staying? So in this flip turned upside down world, the teams to be losing the most players to the 100 are Surrey with 15, Somerset with 11, and Lancashire with 10. The teams that are losing the least are Glamorgan with 2, Northamptonshire are losing 2, Worcestershire are losing just 1 player in Adam Hose. But a team I want to talk about in particular, because you've kind of identified them as having that best of both worlds, where they're not losing too many players, and when of the players they are losing, they get 1 or 2 of them back, is Gloucestershire. So they are only losing David Payne, Marshant de Lange, and Matt Taylor. But Matt Taylor returns to them once all the England Test players come back. And as a squad, as a unit who've qualified for the quarterfinals of the Blast, that aren't being damaged too much by losing too many players to the 100s, they're looking in good shape.
Well, they're basically at full strength of the bat, aren't they? So you take that as a starting point, and full strength for them with the bat means Cameron Bancroft and James Bracey and Miles Hammond and Ollie Price, who scored 600 runs this last year.
Sounds good.
And Matt Taylor's had a brilliant blast, deserved his replacement gig. It's only 2 games because and this is the volatility and frankly how ludicrous it can be with the 100 replacements. He's a 2-game replacement as a left-arm seamer for Zach Crawley.
Yes, well, that's like.
He's just there to sit on to fill a spot on the bench, isn't he? Like you struggle to see how, if Matt Taylor ends up playing for London Spirit, you can only say that they've built their team bizarrely.
Don't rule it out.
So, well, yeah, hopefully he gets to go, because he bowled well enough the Blast. You'd like to think that's, he didn't get a wild card gig, but you'd like to think that's, there is that relationship between the two. But no, on a broader point with them, they're playing well, which is a big thing. They've qualified for the quarters out of the South Group, beating Essex and Hampshire. You'd say sort of the main 2 to that spot, which certainly Hampshire's case takes a lot of doing historically. And they got to the semi-finals this last year as well, so they kind of know how to play it. They, in a weird way, it means they've played more 50 over cricket than others in the last year or two, and they also a bit like Leicestershire saw the value of it. They had a really poor season otherwise, and it kind of wrestled back to momentum and sort of the rest of the slide, and actually meant that they were able to, kind of sort of bluff their way through the final month of the season as a this bit of a success story. Reached the last 4, lost a very bad toss at Grace Road in the rain, and lost a semi-final that, on another day could have gone the other way. They could have found themselves at Trent Bridge. So I'd back them to be strong in the same way that I think Northampton, Derby, and Glamorgan in particular will have the same strengths. They're just not losing many players. As you say, Worcestershire have only lost Adam Hose, but they've also got 11 players out injured, and have got a bit of a ragtag bowling attack at the moment. And Joe Leach is having to act as a bowling coach because he's still on the way back from his knee injury. So it's not. It's not. But this is why we said before, it's such a hard competition to judge, because people look at Worcester and say, "Oh, they'll be strong. They've only lost one player," but actually, you take a Hampshire or Warwickshire, they've lost I think 7-5 players respectively, but they know how to play this competition. They've got strength in the really important areas. Warwickshire, we've got Ed Barnard on the show today, and he is the king of this competition. He's a really reliable red ball bowler, and he's a really reliable red ball batter. He's averaging 47 in the championship this year. He's churning out runs in Div 1. He scored 600 runs this last year. He's averaging 90 in his last 12. He's averaging 90 essentially since the start of last season in this competition.
He's great numbers.
He got his list day record last year and he broke it on Wednesday.
Nick, I think this is the perfect moment, given the build-up we're giving him, to hear from the man himself. Here is Ed Barnard in conversation with Nick Friend. As he said, he made his highest list day score on the opening day of the competition. He is the king of the One Day Cup. He guided Warwickshire to their highest ever list day chase, which surprised me, actually. I think that was a sign of like how people don't play as much list day cricket, because he was thinking about 320, 330.
No, but I do also think it's their highest ever successful list day chase. If they've chased twice more in a losing cause, but that
doesn't count.
They lost. But what I would say, I was just clarifying for our regular listener. Okay. What I would say is, I think I kind of agree. I found that stat in the press box yesterday and relayed it, but it surprised me, but it also kind of didn't, because actually we've been spoiled in the last few years. But let's go back 5-10 years. You're not chasing 330 often, if at all, are you? But actually, that game was a perfect example for what we talk about. For what we're talking about here with what this competition looks like this year. In these last few years, Essex got 320 batting first. Nick Brown got 70 odds. But then they have got a really young attack. They had Aaron Beard yesterday was their senior seamer, along with Ben Allison, who I think I worked it out that Essex's seam attack had 900 fewer first-class wickets than Warwickshire's. That's basically where this competition sits. You've got Beard and Allison as the senior men for Essex, and you've got Jamal Richards, who is A, coming back from injury, and a bowling injury, and B, is young. Then you've got Noah Thane, who's a teenager, England 19s. Luke Benkenstein, who's a teenager, England 19s. Tom Westley, who's a very occasional off spinner. That's where the bowling is where you win and lose these games, because every team's going to have enough batters, young or old.
So, I hope your opening question to Ed Barnard is that rubbish bowling attack, easy runs. Didn't mean anything.
I didn't say rubbish. It's not rubbish at all, is it? It's
I mean, hey, I can read between the lines. Anyway, this is Ed Barnard. Ed Barnard is in your ears right now.
Hello and welcome to this segment of this week's episode of the Cricketers County Conversation, joined by Ed Barnard, the Metro Bank King. Weir Mulder was the Metro Bank Callis, so technically we're short on all rounders. But now that he's gone off and he's sort of taken that name, I mean, you obviously started with 170 on Wednesday. We're talking Thursday. It's probably about Friday. You averaged 90 this last year. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm a bit tired this morning, but obviously over the moon with how yesterday went and how we started the comp. Obviously, personally, was nice to score some runs and take a couple of wickets, but also just to get off the mark with a win and go 1 from 1 going into. We've got quite a busy start, so if we can get off to a good start, hopefully it sets us up well for the rest of the comp.
I think around saying this, you're obviously skippering. This is your first. You skippered Worcester in the Blast, right? 4 years ago. Apart from that, is this
did
kind of all the senior captaincy you've done, isn't it?
Yeah. I did quite a bit growing up, sort of junior stuff, but then never really, apart from a short stint during COVID, which didn't quite go to plan, but was a nice taste of it a few years ago. This is the first sort of proper role I've had, and it's one I've been really looking forward to. Obviously, I've done the vice captaincy this year with Davo, and it's been great learning off him. And just to be around a few more of those sort of leadership conversations and selection meetings and stuff like that, just to get a taste of it. So, I've been really looking forward to it. When I got the nod and got asked to do it, it was something I jumped at. And like I said, we've got a really good squad in this comp as well, so that makes it even more exciting. Where hopefully there's a chance we might be able to go and win a trophy.
Can I ask, like, for someone like you, this comp has obviously you joined John Warwick from Worcester. Don't think it's unfair to say probably moved to it's moved to a slightly bigger club with bigger resource, bigger squads, bigger names around. Like, has this competition helped you in that sense? I guess like establishing yourself in a way. As you say, like you're sat here as a captain, talking selection with their coach, with Alex Davis, who skips obviously the championship. Like, I don't know, has this? Do you feel like it's given you a bit more responsibility? Like the way, certainly the numbers would suggest that you. Yeah, I guess like you look like a senior player.
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously I've got quite a few games and years under my belt now, so I think naturally the more you play, the more experienced you become, the more you try and act in that sort of way. But yeah, this comp last year I really enjoyed. Obviously, it went well personally, but you've got such a nice mix in the team of some really experienced pros and some real good players, but also it's a great chance for the young players to come through and to blood them and give them a real taste of senior cricket in front of big crowds. Yesterday it was pretty much a full house on a Wednesday at Chelmsford, which was brilliant. We've got Sussex on Sunday, which I'm sure will be a good crowd again. Leicester a day-night game. So yeah, it's just such a nice opportunity for them to come in, but also sort of get used to that feeling of playing some like professional cricket, and it's not taken away from the comp at all that they're playing. And you look around, there's some seriously good names playing, and like we've got Leicester tomorrow, and Rahani's playing. So like there's still some really good overseas, and the quality's still really high. Obviously, everybody wants to be playing the 100, and I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that that's not still my goal. I'd still love to be in that competition. It's the highest domestic competition around. So. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's another chance to win a trophy.
Can I ask on the 100 thing there, like from obviously like the 100 replacements are pretty volatile, and guys come and go. And at the moment, for example, Matt Taylor is on a 2-match stint as Zach Crawley's replacement. Like it's not particularly like for like. It's kind of hard to see how he played. Obviously, they played one game last night. Kind of hard to see how he plays the second one. Like you as captain in this comp, going very well, started very well, have gone very well in this before. Is there a decision to make there? Like if your agent came to you and said there is a replacement gig, if you want it, is it as cut and dry as saying, "Oh, yeah, let's go for it," or actually, as captain in a competition that you feel like you can win, where you've got a really big role? Is it? I don't know. Like, is it a bit more nuanced than that?
Yeah, I've not given it too much thought if something like that came up, but I suppose it would be. There would be. I think there'd be a decision to make. It's hard because, like I say, my goal is to play in the 100 at some point. It's like I say, it's the best quality of cricket we have in this country that's not international. So even if you're there and not playing, the standard of coaches, the standard of overseas that would be there in training, I think it's a pretty hard opportunity to turn down. But I also understand the other side of it, especially as captain now, when you're looking at building a team to win a comp, you want that consistency. So yeah, it probably would be a tough decision. It's not something I've thought of if it comes up at any point. Obviously, I'd have to have a think, but yeah, I'd be surprised if I turned something like that down. Sure. But like I say, at the minute, all I'm focusing on is just scoring runs, taking wickets, and hopefully helping us win games, and then head towards those knockout stages. You
obviously gave a debut to Theo Wiley yesterday. I think I'm right. It was a really cool game. Like, I know you got you got the runs as you do, but I think there were 6 in between the two squads. Tasmania didn't play for you guys, but in the 2 matchday squads, I think there were 6 current England under-19 internationals. And I don't know, like it's obviously not the reason for the competition, but it's a really cool byproduct of it. I think like how you touched briefly on Hamza Sheikh after the game yesterday. I think you said he was like one of the best young players you've seen. Like what have you made of? What did you make yesterday of? I guess sort of the guys around you, whether that's Hamza or so Theo didn't have much of a chance, but then Charlie Allison, Luke Bankerstein, Noah Thane, and in that Essex side, and I guess the guys who've come up against last year as well.
Yeah, I think my overriding emotion with those sort of things is how exciting it is. I think Allison and Benkenstein both played really well yesterday. Played 2 very good knocks. Benkenstein especially came in and struck the ball really cleanly and played some ridiculously good shot. So there's obviously, I've played against him a couple of years ago when he was a bit younger, and even then you could see that he was a talent. And like you say, Charlie obviously played really well as well. Hamza, like I say, he's a pretty special talent, I think, from what I've seen, and he's been sort of earmarked for a while now at Warwickshire that hopefully he's going to go on and do some really good things for us. And I think this year's a really good opportunity for him, batten up the order and get a consistent role, for him to really make use of that. Like I say, he's just come back from the 19s and made a really good 100 there. And I think, we're expecting some good things from him. And Theo's really exciting. He's a Shrewsbury schoolboy, so he knows my dad quite well. And I'd heard for the last couple of years that there's this young kid coming through who's pretty fearless and just takes cricket on. And then I started to see it in the second and again in the 19s. He's made some really good scores, and he's ridiculously exciting. And hopefully he gets a chance maybe further up the order, or a chance to come in and help us win a game at some point. But he plays some ridiculous shots and he hits the ball very cleanly. So I think, having played in it for 2 or 3 years now, you get to see the best youngsters coming through, and all I can say is how exciting it is for English cricket. I think you see the amount of them as well that progress straight into the 100 or go into 100 very quickly, and I think that just shows the talent that's coming through and how well the system's sort of working in England at the minute.
Am I right in saying you played England 19s, didn't you, back in the day, or was it Lions? It was 19s, wasn't it? How, I don't know, like how big would it, if you sort of take yourself back, I think it was 10 years ago, wasn't it? 2014. Like, how good would a competition like this have been for you back then? I mean, obviously the game was very different. The structure of the season was pretty different. But I don't know, like this feels like a really obvious way in now, and like a way that, particularly for lads who are playing England 19s, rather than just sort of like, kids in the academy, like it feels like a way in that is pretty risk-free for coaches to drop guys and give them a chance, just kind of knowing that the opposition will have sort of players in the same boat. Like, don't know, like we're looking back, I know you started young at Worcester, but would something like this have been helpful?
Yeah, I think from that terms, obviously, if it gives you a chance to get into the first team a little bit quicker and get exposed to senior cricket a little bit quicker, that can only be good. Obviously, the 50 over comp when I first sort of was around the setup was really strong, because obviously there was no 100, so you had more players to pick from. You had more overseas, obviously. So the standard of competition was probably a little bit higher, but I look at the 19th team we had. It probably took a few of the lads. I was pretty lucky at Worcester because we had Steve Rhodes in charge. He was always very good at getting blooding youngsters anyway, so I was pretty quickly in the setup. But I look at some of the lads I played with who were high quality players, and we had a really good squad, and it took them a year or two to break into or play regular first team cricket. So like you say, maybe something, if it was like this 10 years ago, they might have got in a bit quicker. But again, even sometimes not playing, playing is obviously what we try and do, but it's not the be all and end all. Sometimes the standard of training, if you're playing or training with higher quality players, you can learn things off that just as quickly sometimes as actually playing first team cricket.
Well, at the other end of the spectrum, you were the leading run scorer last year. Ollie Andolby was the leading wicket taker, and I think what struck me in the last couple of years, and this competition in particular, is that the teams that have done well have been the teams that have had sort of senior seamers. If that's fair way of putting it. I mean, obviously there are a lot of strong batters, but I guess just the nature of the beast means that a lot of seamers disappear to the 100 or are struggling with injuries or are being managed through this month. You've had, even the you had yesterday, Ollie, Craig Miles, yourself. That gives you a real strong basis. I mean, is that how you guys have seen it? I mean, I was like, Ollie was by far and away the leading seamer last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think Ollie's obviously an amazing bowler and has done it for a number of years and knows his game really well now. And I actually think the ball, we spoke a lot, the balls last year in the 50 overs actually seems to do quite a bit. That first 10, 20 overs, having gone through a few years of 50 over cricket where it was kind of crash bang wallop at the start, it was almost like T20 cricket. Last year felt a bit more like the first 10, 15 overs was red ball cricket and a bit of a throwback really, that it was get through the first and then you look to set up for later on. And I think some of the pitches we played on and the balls felt like they nipped around and swung a bit more. We actually found the balls didn't swing as much yesterday, so whether that will be a continuing theme this year, I'm not sure. But yeah, like you say, obviously in the seam bowling ranks around the country, you're probably more likely to get injuries just because of the nature of the job. So there might be a bit more chopping and changing with replacements or even people getting injured. So yeah, we were lucky last year that we generally had a seam attack that were all fit and we could rotate a little bit, but also we could have that consistency of selection. Because yeah, like you say, if you can have that reliability of 2 or 3 senior seamers, it really helps bringing in other young seamers who you can sort of blood in a little bit more easily if they're not having too much pressure put on them. But also, like you say, it helps you win games.
What you touched on there, the first class versus T20 thing was, so where is the 50 over game? Where is this 50 over competition? Like, does it feel? Which ones feel more like? I know you were 330 yesterday, but obviously a lot of high scores over the last few years. But equally, a lot of Red Bull specialists have done really well. When you talk, I don't know, when you sit down the dressing room aside and talk about how you're going to play it, have you kind of lent on one of the formats more than the other as an example of like the base you're trying to build and that kind of thing? Or I don't know, where do you feel like it like this, not 50 over cricket worldwide, but kind of this month?
Yeah, I think obviously it doesn't feel like it has the intensity of T20 cricket, and it definitely doesn't feel like you have to go out and play or go as hard maybe as you do in T20. I think especially that middle period of where you can only have 4 out, I think that makes such a big difference. If you can sort of build the first 20, 30 overs, obviously batting positively, but if you can really build a base, even that 30 to 40 overs, you can kick on. Because if you've got batters in with only 4 out, it makes it so hard. There's always a boundary option. And I think that's the biggest difference. Obviously in T20, once you get to the point when there's 5 out, you get your pretty standard fields really, but you have to be as a batter, it's really exciting to get to that point if you're in, because you feel like you can really take hold of that. So it does feel like you can give yourself a bit more time. Whereas obviously you've watched some of the international cricket of the last few years of 50 over cricket, and they just go hell for leather, and they do it really well. And I'm sure there's teams around the country that do, but I think our team the squad we've got at Warwickshire for the last year and this year, with the likes of Yatesy, myself, Rhodesy in that top 3. Yeah, I think sort of setting up the game for later on has worked well for us, and we found a formula that seems to be working well at the minute.
Yeah, and just finally, before I get chucked out of this storeroom at the Oval, I find one of the most interesting things about this tournament, particularly going into it every year, and I found this yesterday actually at Essex. You're never quite sure how strong anyone's going to be, are you? Like you kind of know who's available. We kind of who's at the hundreds, but they could have had Dean Elgar yesterday, they could have had Simon Harmer yesterday, and suddenly, you're looking at a game with however many thousand test runs and however many counter wickets in the last 7-8 years. Like, is that almost the hardest thing as a skipper in this comp, that you genuinely, it does take a few games to work out actually where everyone is likely sort of looking, and in 2 groups of 9, everyone's got different priorities, haven't they? Some teams got a championship run in, some teams are trying to stay up, some teams lost loads of guys to 100, some teams are at full strength but giving guys a break. Do you know what to expect, or is it very much, as I say, rock up yesterday and find out the day before that Dean Elgar's not involved?
Yeah, it definitely feels like one of the harder competitions to plan for, especially like you say, opposition teams. Like you say, we were turning up yesterday. We fully were aware that Elgar and Harmer might have been playing. They might have been around, and obviously they're 2 high quality players. So we were. I think the whole country would have been waiting for sort of yesterday and today to see the teams that get put out, and you can start to get an idea of what teams are looking at. But also, because there's a lot of youngsters playing, obviously there's lots of footage of age group cricket and stuff now, but it's harder to analyse, and you don't have the depth of coverage that you have as pro teams now, with the amount of, you can watch every ball that a batter's facing in their career, and obviously the analysts do such a great job. But yeah, it does feel like at times you're a bit more thinking on your feet, and even yesterday it was tapping into sort of Hamza and Theo, who knew the young lads who were playing for them, and trying to get a bit more of an idea of how they play. So I think it's good as well. It allows you to keep everyone involved, and
I was going to say probably
really
quite
have
nice.
to use everyone.
Probably quite nice for them to feel quite important.
Yeah, exactly. And he's been away skippering the 19, so he knows a lot of the lads around the country around his age group, but also all three of the lads who have played 19s. Everyone, there's that many connections around the country now. It's very easy to find someone who has a link to someone who might be able to give you something that helps out. But yeah, I think that's the one thing I'm excited for as skipper as well, is that thinking on your feet and trying to work out during the game what's the best option for what pitch or for what matchup, rather than it being too set out at the start. And again, that's the beauty of 50 over cricket. It's one of my favourite formats, always has been. You get such different phases of the game at different times that it allows for you to really show a full set of skills.
Thank you very much, Ed Barnard, for his time. Thank you for joining us on the County Conversation. Nick, you were at that game where he scored that century on the opening match of the competition, on the opening day of the competition. There was a lot of talented England under-19 players, and that is a kind of byproduct of this competition. Can you just give us a view on that, please?
Yeah, well, I wrote in my piece at the end of it. It felt like the archetypal One Day Cup game in a way, in that there were like a lot of really talented youngsters, and then Ed Barnard scored 100, which does seem to be like the way it's gone for the last year or so. But no, it's a really good byproduct, and it's not the idea, it's not the reason for the competition, but it's an objectively good thing, isn't it? I think there were six current England under-19 players involved in the two matchday squads. 5 played. Tasnim Ali didn't play, but he's the young leggy, 18-year-old leggy. But Hamza Sheikh, who's England's youth test captain, played. Noah Thane, who I mentioned just earlier, bats top 5, bowls first change. Luke Benkenstein bowls leggies, bats top 6, got a really good 40 off 20 odds. Charlie Allison bats top 5, got 70 at run a ball. Ben Allison's younger brother, Luke Benkenstein, son of Dale. Charlie Allison, England 19s as well. In fact, that Essex 3, 4 and 5. Those 3 Essex lads have batted 3, 4 and 5 for England on the 19s together this summer. Theo Wiley, another England 19s lad, was making professional debut for Warwickshire.
Teague Wiley.
No, I did get confused.
Very confusing.
To do a quick Google. Theo Wiley, England 19s as well, made his professional debut yesterday for Warwickshire. So yeah, it was cool. Like I say, it's not the reason for the comp, it's not why it's there, but it can only be a good thing. And so, watching someone like Charlie Allison, who's in his second year now of it, and he's got 350s in 8 games or something. He's just a really talented kid. And actually, you can go on YouTube and watch Charlie Allison as a 6-year-old. He's one of these viral sensation kids who, you see like now on Instagram, people say, "Well, wow, how good is this kid going to be when he's 20?" And it's really weird watching someone who actually is that version of he's the kid in the oversized pads as a 6-year-old playing on drives.
Yeah.
And now he's only a little bit taller. As an 18-year-old batting in, as a 19-year-old batting in the One Day Cup. And it's got genuinely, it's got 300,000 views on YouTube. I interviewed him about it last year. It's a little weird.
It makes me feel very uncomfortable, all of it.
It's like Freddie Adu, but
I think because I don't like the idea of those people ever kind of getting old.
No, exactly. I think you should never see them again.
Yeah, in the context of if you are, what pressure do you grow up with if you're kind of since you were 6 years old, it was like, you are incredible. Anyway, someone else who is very young and very, very good. In terms of, I don't know how surprised I am. I feel like if someone said to me, the England under-19 players, they play in this competition, I'd have been like, yeah, they should be. Because they are the kind of next best cabs off the rank. They are the next greats of the game, hopefully. And so they're on the cusp, but they're very young.
Don't want to put any pressure on them.
Don't want to put any pressure on them, but you should become the best players of all time. Please, thank you. I always find it really tough when you look through those under-19 scorecards, because you do get the most incredible names, and then you get about 3 people who play for England, 3 or 4 people who are good county cricketers, and 3 or 4 who kind of fade away. And they've got an anecdote for a while, and they're better than me, so fair play. Lots of people are. But someone else who's very young and doing extremely well. This could be the competition a little bit for Farhan Ahmed, Rayan Ahmed's little brother. I appreciate that's kind of being a bit newsy and just being excited by the child who is the younger brother of the youngest player to have ever played Test cricket for England. I think that's a very exciting storyline. If you haven't seen Sorry?
It's so weird, isn't it? Because so James Rue's younger brother, Tom, is
meant-
likely to play in the One Day Cup as well. It's like you're not allowed a younger brother who plays. You're already too young.
I mean, I play occasionally with a guy who is on as a youth at Northants and played against James Rue's little brother, and he just said he was incredible. And I was like, "Do you mean the other one? Do you mean the one who's currently a professional cricketer?"
Yeah,
And he was
no,
like,
exactly.
No. The younger one who isn't a professional cricketer. He's amazing. So looking forward to potentially seeing double Rue in action. But yeah, is there a world where Farhan Ahmed could break his older brother's record for being the youngest ever player to play for England? It seems unlikely, but it'd be so cool if that did happen. Bertie Foreman's another name that's worth just chucking out there. I think you just told me he has a Doosra, which
He won
I find hard to believe.
I'm sure you're going to say that. Well, I've been told. I've not seen it, but I was told.
I ain't seen it.
I had a good chat with a guy called Shaftab Khalid, who had a deucer himself, coached a bit with the England 19s a couple of years ago, was a spin bowling coach at Warwickshire at the time, played England A when he was at Worcester about 15, 20 years ago. And he told me, so this all comes from him, that he'd been sort of showing him his deucer and they'd been trying it a bit. This is a couple of years ago. More interestingly with Bertie Foreman, I think, is that I'm sure this is probably why you brought him up, he won is it the O'Reilly medal? Is that what it's called?
It is. I think the O'Reilly medal is the correct name, but I'm not. As soon as you've said it, I'm now feeling less confident. Basically, he won the best player in the Sydney grade cricket competition last year, playing
not for
Manly,
overseas, for all cricketers,
just for everyone. Yeah, and it's given the disdain that many English club cricketers are held in over in kind of grade cricket in general,
particularly off spinners.
Particularly off spinners, to be 19 years old and go over and win that is a serious feather in his cap. To go from one end of the scale to the other, it's such a strange, interesting, fun competition in so many ways because we're talking about all these youngsters here, and then we go, Ajinkya Rahane's playing. He's good.
Ajinkya Rahane is facing guys making their professional debuts. Like, it's a really unusual competition. A guy called Rob Lord made his debut for Notts yesterday, against India, like a former India captain. It's Prithvi Shaw. I saw Prithvi Shaw was cleaned up by Norfolk's Andy Hamby. I want to say on Sunday.
Great time on MD play.
It's like forget the grandkids. Just like it's a great story for the WhatsApp groups. Lads, you'll never guess what happened today. But like it is, and of course Prithvi Shaw caused carnage last year. He got his double 100 against Somerset. He got a very quick 100 against Durham, and then he completely dropped me in it because I went to Northampton to cover Northampton Worcester and arrived to be told that he'd done his knee and wasn't playing. So I wrote back anyway. But it's a great. I honestly think it's a fascinating competition because it straddles a lot of different parts of the spectrum, and you've got different counties who see it for different things. Make no mistake that the teams bring in Rahane and Shaw. So this is a massive opportunity to go and win a trophy, and in a game where, and I know Northampton qualified for the last day of the Blast, and that's fantastic. But in a game where increasingly it's tough for the sort of non-test ground counties, let's say, to challenge the top of the championship, at the top of in the top rungs of the Blast. I know Somerset are reigning champions. It is a great opportunity. Like, I think you were talking to about this? Like, I was trying to work out where you'd pitch this competition in football terms. It's kind of like the League Cup. It's kind of like the Europa Conference League. For the teams in it, it's a great opportunity to go and win something. And also, like to said earlier about what Gloucester had last year, it's a great opportunity to sort of to turn an otherwise disappointing season in some cases into a real successful season.
On the topic of winning, I'm going to give you 3 words. Well, you're allowed 5 words because you've got to say 1 county name and then 2 player names. I want you to predict me a winner. You're not allowed to explain why you've chosen them, and I want you to give me a leading run scorer and a leading wicket taker for the competition, for the listeners and viewers.
Ooh, that's not a word. Leading run scorer, Ed Barnard.
Wonderful. Back in again.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show.
And he's 173 without loss after 1 game.
It's a good starting point.
Leading wicket taker, I'm going to go Ollie Hammond Dolby because he was last year, and I think he'll just do it again. And I know Ed Barnard was the top run scorer last year. I'm just same as last year, basically.
Wonderful. I think
not-
I don't know if that's very intelligent or incredibly dull. Potentially both.
But what story
And
it
to
would
win
be
it-
if they both did it again? Well, I might as well say Warwickshire for the set.
It's a good point. To follow the train of logic, yeah, that does make sense.
You'd think so. You'd have to say if that happens, if Anadolu and Barnard do it, you'd like to think they'd get last four at least.
I'm going to follow your earlier train of logic and go Gloucestershire to win it because of the logic you've supplied. Of they're only missing 3 and their batting's at full strength, and they get Matt Taylor back with the ball after 2 games. But I think the team to watch that we touched upon earlier be very interesting is Essex with that very young but very exciting, talented kind of middle order.
The last curveball to throw into all this is when the 100 teams have played 2 games each and players do start drifting back. That's another. It's the other curveball in this competition. The squads we're talking about now might, in a couple of weeks' time, for example, Gloucester won their quarter-final last year through a Miles Hammond 100. Miles Hammond was playing Birmingham Phoenix until a couple of weeks earlier. So
what we're saying is,
who knows?
We don't know. Perfect. Well, lovely conclusion to the show. Nobody covers county cricket like the cricketer. There we go. What a segue that is. And you can get access to all of our coverage of all 18 counties online from as little as £3.99 a month. The team at the cricketer have won the ECB's Outstanding Domestic Coverage of Cricket Award for the last 6 years running. So you don't have to take our word for it. And if you do want to subscribe, there is a link in the show notes below. Nick, thank you as ever for joining. I've been Cameron. He's been Nick. We'll see you and speak to you again next week.